It's that time again. Welcome back to the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. On a rare off week in the world of IndyCar, in between Road America and Mid-Ohio. And in front of the mid-race, we're going to have our mid-season review. 8 rounds done, 9 to go. Obviously 8 rounds. I was a double header. Half the rounds done, and half the season to complement on. So, what else other than to look back at the first 8 races of the 2023 NTT IndyCar Series season and look forward to the last 8 rounds of the year. Lots to talk about, a lot to predict, and a lot to look back on, which is convenient because I'm joined by both Archie and Ellie on the podcast again this week. So, where else to start with our driver of the season? And I think we're going to be fairly universal on this one. Has anyone not picked Alex Palou as their driver of the season so far?
Nope, it's Alex Palou. I think it's a pretty unanimous choice that he's been so incredibly consistent. Finished 8th in St. Pete, and then since then it's been all top 5s, and really the last 4 races he's been fairly imperious. 3 wins, possibly should have won the Indy 500. He's qualified inside the top 7 for every race, so he's got form in races, he's got qualifying form on his side. I think he qualified 4th in Long Beach, and then since then it's been top 3s every race, 2nd, 3rd, back-to-back poles, 3rd again. You look at the fact he's not making many errors. He hasn't got a DNF yet. He had that crash in practice at Road America, but bounced back to qualify 3rd, and then obviously went on to win the race as well. He just looks in such control, really. I think a lot of drivers have said, oh, well, he's due a setback. That's why he's so far ahead in the championship. But he had a pretty significant setback during the Indy 500, and he bounced back to finish 4th. So it's not like he's been without pieces of bad luck. So, yeah, he's been sensational, and I don't really see that changing, to be honest. He just looks unbeatable at the moment.
Yeah, I also put Alex Palou. I feel like his racing so far has just been unstoppable, and the consistency, which is something that we consistently bring up on each podcast, is just unmatched. And then I think his finishing position so far just really reflects on why he's leading the championship and why he deserves to lead it. I mean, his results are just amazing. So
I think one thing I would say is it's quite significant that, last season maybe was a bit more rocky for him with all of the contract dispute going on. But then when that was all settled, which was, I think, before Laguna Seca, that was all agreed, he went on and won by an almighty margin at Laguna, and he's kind of just carried that into this season. He's got no distractions, and because of that, he just looks... he just is performing so well, and there's no other driver you could really pick for driver of the season other than him, because that margin at the front of the championship is so significant.
Yeah, so he actually started off the season quite quietly at St. Petersburg. Looking back at it, I mean, we had come the chaotic race and he seemed to be nowhere. But ever since then, when the competition has really ramped up, he's just been one step ahead of absolutely everyone else, and it is what's made him stand out so far. Top 5 in every race since Texas, including 4 podiums. And even on ovals, where he's never been that strong at ovals. Texas, he was right in the mix for victory. In Indy, he probably should have won potentially. And now he's got that level added to his game as well. He's strong in every department. He's super consistent, obviously, in qualifying, but the race and on his tyres, on his fuel, on different types of tracks, his raw pace. He's just such an all-rounder driver, and it's really hard just to find any small error with Palou because they're so few and far between. He just does everything so precisely and so effortlessly, really. He really makes the most competitive series in the world look somewhat simple at times.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it, really, because it is so closely contested. IndyCar is, obviously renowned for being so competitive, yet Palou, he's in his 4th year in the series, yet he's already proving himself as at least one of the greatest talents the series has ever seen. And if he manages to become a 2-time champion, that puts him on par with obviously the likes of Joseph Newgarden, Will Power in terms of championships. Yeah, he's been incredibly impressive, and even you could suggest it's he's showing form even better than he showed when he won the championship in 2021.
Yeah, he hasn't had an off round all year, and obviously St. Petersburg wasn't the ideal race, but he's never quite had form like this. And as you said, everyone's expecting their own bit of bad luck, but Pelot's just such a strong driver. You don't expect it to happen. He won't make his own mistakes. He never really has ever made his own mistakes, which have cost him in races. He's not that type of driver. Gotta say, I think when we look at the championship picture, it's so difficult to see. Was it 74-point lead being caught up? I touched on this a couple of weeks ago. In 2021, his title almost fell apart in 2 consecutive races at Indianapolis and Gateway. But even now, he's got such a margin where he does have 2 races go wrong in a row. He's still got that gap, and he's still comfortable at the front.
Yeah, I mean, a 74-point lead after 8 races. That's, I don't know if I would say it's unheard of, but it's very rare to see such a margin at such an early stage. And it's not like you feel like other drivers, your likes of Joseph Newgarden, for instance, are performing badly at all. It's just the fact that Pelot is just seemingly blowing them out of the water, fairly frequently.
Huge couple of races between now and the end of the season. Obviously, we go to Mid-Ohio next week, and it's another track Pelot's gone so well at before. And if he carries on this form, it's going to be so difficult. And I think Pelot is going to be a serious threat to ending the streak of the championship going to the last round at every single race in the last 16 years, whatever it is. I think Pelot is going to put a stop to that this season, certainly at this rate. We reported on the DIVEBOMB Instagram on Sunday morning that Pelot is potentially looking at a Formula One move. His pending move to McLaren next year has obviously been well documented. But from my end, I'd actually be slightly disappointed if Pelot moved to F1. I'm not sure. Don't get me wrong, he's a driver who completely deserves an F1 seat, but I think I'd sort of miss him in IndyCar, particularly with him at the prospect of our own McLaren next year.
Yeah, I think it'd be a big loss to the series. Pelot is a credit to the series, really, and it's great to have that sort of talent. And then you've got IndyCar trying to grow as a series, and I wouldn't blame Pelot if he went for an F1 seat, but I think for the series, it kind of maintains that view of it being quite inferior to F1 if Pelot does then go from winning the championship in IndyCar and feeling like there's another step above to move to F1. I mean, I'd be excited to see what he could do in F1, and maybe, if he did well in F1, people would start to think, oh, maybe IndyCar isn't like this second series. So it could work both ways, but I think it'd be a big loss. I'd like to see over, many years to come what Pelot can do, in terms of sealing whatever his legacy may be in IndyCar. And if he did move to our McLaren, I think that would be, I'd be really excited to see what he can do there.
I don't know how it translates with drivers wise of going from IndyCar to F1. I know that drivers have gone from F1 to IndyCar, and I know that if they've been struggling a little bit, then they've gone over and they've been doing better. But I'd be a bit concerned that if he did go over to F1, that maybe, depending on the team who goes into that, maybe his talents would be lost a little bit, or it depends on the driving of the cars and all of that. But I'd be worried that maybe he'd take the confidence of going from doing really well in IndyCar to then going over to F1, and it maybe not going as great as he would have thought.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit unprecedented, really. I mean, as I said, I would love to see it happen, but at the same time, I would be, I'd be very disappointed if we did lose Pelot from IndyCar.
I think that if you were to pick any driver, I would pick Alex Pelot. I think his driving style actually probably is the most suited to F1. Kind of very good in the tyres, obviously very consistent, which is what it needs to be. And I think his driving style probably is the most suited to F1, which is obviously quite important for him. He doesn't really tend to make too many mistakes against something that you have the eyes of the world watching you on F1. And if anyone was going to move, I would say it's Alex Pelot. And at the end of the day, if his F1 career didn't go well, any IndyCar team would be instantly wanting him back. So even if he went to F1, I'm sure we'd see him again.
Yeah, I think the point about driving style is a good one, actually, because you look at a lot of drivers in IndyCar and they really suit, throwing the cars into corners and fighting the car, whereas Pelot seems a bit, just always a bit calm behind the wheel. And that's not to say, I mean, he's showing it's a bit faster. That's not to say, it is the best way to go about it in IndyCar, because you've seen a lot of success from drivers who, are fighting the car. Like you look at even Pato O'Ward, Colton Herta, drivers like that who are always on the edge. Whereas Palou, he always does seem like he's got it a bit more under control, just calmer. And I think it's a good point you make about, he'd be better on the tyres, and that's something that would definitely translate to F1. So yeah, I think he is the driver I would like to see go over there most, but at the same time, I really wouldn't like to see him depart from IndyCar.
Yeah, I think if we see maybe 2025, it'd be brilliant, because I do want to see what he could do at Aaron McLaren, because I feel Aaron McLaren still maybe are slightly the sleeping giant. Maybe Pato O'Ward has been maximising that car for the last 3 years. But I think O'Ward and Palou in the same team are actually going to be very exciting prospects. We mentioned driving styles. They're completely different in the way they drive. But they're both seen as these two young talents of the future. And I think for them to go directly head-to-head would also be quite fun to watch. Let's move on to the surprise of the season. So hopefully we aren't as unanimous on this. I'm going to kick off. I think most of the people listening will know who I'm going to go on about, but Agustin Canapino. I said in the Dive from pre-season predictions article that honestly I thought he'd be miles off the pace. He'd be way at the back, but he just seems so comfortable already, and it's just really, really surprised me. For a guy, I said this every week, but I deserve to say it again. Didn't speak English at the start of the year. Has never driven a single seater, yet alone an IndyCar. Has never driven an oval before. And he's just taken it like a duck to water. I appreciate his results on paper don't look that incredible, but his pace all round has been pretty good. We saw him in Detroit, for example, fighting in and around the top 10. He started the season brilliantly with 12th at St. Petersburg, and what was even more impressive to me was that excellent 12th in Texas. Led a couple of laps at Long Beach. He's really taken it to a well, and I think the start of pre-season there was a lot of criticism towards his name. A pay driver taking the seats of people like Linus Lundqvist, but I think he's shown why he should be here, and I think Juncos absolutely took a gamble with taking Canapino, but not only is he proving to be a decent driver, but he's also expanding the reach of the sport. There's been loads of talk about Argentina recently and potentially a race there next year, and I think the work Canapino's done in South America has been unbelievable.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no variation from me either. I've also said Canapino for that. I think one of the most stark things is the fact that he has, he's behind Ilott by a decent margin in the championship, but when you look actually at the races, he's often been, near enough on pace with his teammate, who is considerably more experienced, especially when you look at single seaters, with Canapino impressively coming in and adapting so quickly, having never driven an open wheel car, a single seater, coming from that, stock car background. Yeah, as you said, his results, might not show it, in every department, but I think St. Pete is an interesting one just because of all of the chaos that went on there. But as you also mentioned, Texas was the one that I really picked out. His first oval race to finish 12th is, that's mighty impressive. And also looking at ovals as well, which is again, it's a completely different discipline of racing compared to what he had ever done before. He qualified so easily for the 500. There was never any doubt there. I think
that was only after one proper run, because he almost crashed in the second run, so we never really got to see what he could fully do. Yeah,
that's true as well. But I mean, that says it all, doesn't it? He managed to get through with one run, and it's not like it was slow either. It was incredibly competitive. Some of the fastest speeds we've ever seen, and he was right on the pace. Obviously, you mentioned he did almost crash, but that was a great save. And I suppose again that shows the skill that he's got, that he could save that on an oval. I mean, that was impressive. But yeah, I think he hasn't on the whole had that many incidents, which is again, another massive thing that's credit to him compared to other rookies who, have maybe seen in the wall a few times. Canapino's barely had any of those. I recall the one in Detroit, which was another really strong weekend for him. He finished 14th. With again, that was he was right on the pace with a lot of other drivers. He was on track battling with the likes of Colton Herter at times. He's been incredibly impressive considering people before the season wrote him off before he'd even really started or was able to show anything. For me, he's the one that's really sort of upset the odds.
Yeah, I went with something different. I know that we picked up a bit on this last episode, but I wrote about Connor Daly being dropped mid-season because I only just started watching it IndyCar this season, but for some reason I didn't realize that they could drop a driver like mid-season. I thought they had to continue on for like the full season, but that was like really shocking that they would do that. And I think I don't know. I know I haven't watched it for a while, but I'm like aware of the impact that he's had on the sport, and it is like a shame to see him like go.
I'm just trying to get up the pre-season predictions, but I'm pretty sure I said Connor Daly would be the surprise of the year. Yep, there we go. Connor Daly, surprise of the year. But I said I thought he would be the surprise of the year because he'd get his first win. He'd maybe snatch a win on one of the ovals. He's been strong at the likes of Iowa. I mean, I might not be wrong that he's surprise of the season, but the surprise was something a bit different. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and we touched on this for a lengthy period of time, but it was disappointing, and obviously it shows how important it is to be competitive in IndyCar, and bringing in the money and constantly staying competitive, and it proves how important it is in this series.
Yeah, and actually, one thing, just going back to Canapino as well, he's obviously behind Marcus Armstrong in the rookie standings, but he's ahead of Benjamin Peterson and Stingray Robb, who both came through Indy Next, Indy Lights, and that is they are familiar with some of the tracks, with the style of racing. And not only has Canapino come into a single seater for the first time, but he's also he's doing almost a better, more competitive job than the other rookies. Yes, he's a more experienced driver, but it's a completely different skill set, and I think that's just something that's notable. I mean, he's ahead of the likes of Devlin DiFrancesco in the championship, Jack Harvey. He's just behind. Oh, in fact, he's level on points with Pagano. So, I mean, that says a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, it's brilliant, really.
Moving on to a disappointment of the season, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, Archie, you're not going to like me for this one, but I'm actually going to go for Scott McLaughlin. The end of last year, we saw a very, very strong Scott McLaughlin. He obviously won in Portland, won in Mid-Ohio. Obviously, appreciate that was kind of mid-season, but in the last 6 races, he finished in the top 6 in every race, including 4 podiums and 2 pole positions. And at the end of this last season, McLaughlin was like, "You've got to really take me as a championship contender." And I was really excited to see what McLaughlin could do this year. And I think, apart from Alabama, as well as his mishaps in St. Petersburg, he's been reasonably quiet. He's got 3 top 10 finishes this year. 4 top 10 finishes this year. But he just hasn't been a championship contender that he and maybe some other IndyCar fans hyped him up to be this year. And I appreciate he's ahead of his teammate Will Power in the standings, but he just, apart from Alabama and St. Petersburg, he just really hasn't shone like I hoped he would. I thought he would be better at the Indy 500, even Texas on an oval. He's gone up pretty strong at. Just slightly disappointing for me, considering when you look at where he was at the end of last season, looking at a championship favourite for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree somewhat. I think it's the fact he has just been quiet. You expected maybe a few more flashy things. I think there's a long way to go. Obviously, he had the win in Barber, which was impressive. He had the front row in Detroit as well. So the pace is somewhat there. I don't know whether you say it. Well, you can't really say it's a Penske thing because of Newgarden, but you look at Power's struggling. I don't think it's been the most incredible year, from a Penske standpoint. When you compare him to Power, I think that maybe, Power won the championship last year. It's almost easy to forget that with him kind of almost dwindling down eighth in the standings. He's not really looked too competitive all that often. So Yeah, I think it's just the fact he hasn't lived up to. I mean, I said he was going to win the championship. He was my prediction, McLaughlin. So I think compared to that, being sixth in the standings, 125 points behind Pillar, I think you could probably say he's been a bit disappointing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a left field one, but I think the hype level towards the end of last year was sort of an all-time high. Whilst that hype wasn't there for sort of Power and a couple of others, I think McLaughlin's stock value massively increased at the end of last year. And don't get me wrong, he was in a very similar position last year. He didn't have a very good first half of the season, and once he got motoring, he really got motoring. But I think it's kind of that critical third season now where you do have an expectation on you now, and I think, as I said, from how people were hyping him up at the end of last year, I was just hoping maybe we have a step above. I was hoping maybe he challenges Newgarden a bit more, for example. And I think Newgarden is maybe someone. I appreciate Newgarden's been in IndyCar for years. I think Newgarden should start being the benchmark McLaughlin goes for. I think hasn't quite matched that this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that there's a couple of tracks coming up that he did win at last year. He won at Mid-Ohio. I think he won at Portland as well.
Yep.
So there are two tracks he's going to as the defending winner. He will probably have confidence going there. I think he's the sort of driver that you could easily see a swing where he will turn around his fortunes and suddenly be up there. But I do agree that I expected him to be competing at the front a bit more than he has done. I think the Indy 500 was quite stark in that regard. He was, he never looked like he was in that front group. I think he never really nailed it in qualifying, neither did Newgarden, but Newgarden went forward. McLaughlin kind of didn't make that much progress. So yeah, I think, well, moving on now actually to my disappointment, which is maybe another left field shout, but again, like with McLaughlin, it's comparative to maybe expectations, and for me it's Romain Grosjean, and that's because of the expectations that the early stages of the season brought, really. After the opening rounds, we were suggesting that he'd be the next first time winner. I don't know. From there on, he's been very, very disappointing. He's had incidents, or in the case of Road America, multiple incidents in, I think, 5 of the 8 races. He's shown speed. He's qualified on pole twice. He's qualified third twice. Yeah, he doesn't seem like he's been able to convert those, strong starting positions into any sort of really meaningful result on a frequent basis. Yeah. I think it feels harsh to say he's the disappointment of the season because he's shown some real pace, but I think I feel like now his confidence has taken a bit of a hit, and the pace is also starting to diminish a little bit as well, and he's starting to become very error-strewn while also not being particularly fast. And I think there really needs to be a bit of an upturn for the rest of the season. Otherwise, I think there will be real questions because, he's shown potential, but there's no point showing potential and that coming to nothing. And that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. And I think we touched on Grosjean being one of the drivers of the season after Alabama, and he should have finished in the top 4 at the first 4 races, and he should have been leading the standings. I mean, St. Petersburg, admittedly, that probably was the only incident this year where he wasn't to blame. Texas blew away a top 5, followed by the 2 second places. Again, probably blew a win in Alabama. But Grosjean's also just gained this tendency to crash out late in oval races, and he crashed out Indy last year, Indy this year, Texas. I'm sure there was another one somewhere where he crashed out. Texas last year, actually, as well. And it's just where the expectation was at, particularly the way he started the season. And then just ever since the month of May started, he's just completely collapsed. And he just hasn't got any form of consistency. And I think Road America, it just summarised last couple of races. He just couldn't keep it on the track at most of the time.
Yeah, it's at a stage where it looks like he needs some sort of reset now, because Road America was just calamitous, really. He qualified badly, and then the race was just, every time you saw him, he was off track, and that was multiple times as well. He was having spins throughout the weekend. It's one of those where you almost question, is something wrong with the car? But I don't think there was. I think he was just having a terrible weekend. I And you look at the
Yeah.
two finished inside the top 10. He's finished second, but you've got the last 3 races. He's finished 24th and lower, 30th, 24th, 25th. That's not good enough, really. And
Yeah,
from someone who we said was, possibly driver of the season in the early races, we said, oh, he's just had a bit of bad luck and he's showing signs. He's 13th in the championship, and that is disappointing.
only one place in front of Callum Ilott.
Yeah,
which,
exactly.
Which says a lot. And Grosjean's got it in him. Like when he crashes out, he's actually running in quite good positions loads of the time. He's just got this really common tendency just to completely bin it, and it's so frustrating because it's just constantly happening. I don't know if he loses focus late in a race or whatever, but it's just become such a common theme. It's really just almost damaging his reputation, which he sort of gained in F1 towards the end of his career.
Yeah, I mean, do you almost feel like now it's coming to the stage where he's just getting frustrated and he's pushing too hard and that's making him crash? And it's hard to really diagnose, isn't it, what the issue is? But I think he really needs a reset heading into Mid-Ohio, and he desperately needs a good weekend there because he can't afford to have another weekend as messy as the last few have been.
Purely just as a Pato fan, I put that just the Indy 500, just the Indy 500 as the disappointment, not like Pato as a whole. That the Indy 500 was like the disappointment. I just repeated that again. I'm sorry, because he was doing so well beforehand. He was consistently getting P3, and I know towards the beginning we was saying that he could have won the championship, and he still can. But then I think he was so close to winning the 500 that I think after that, because of the incident that he had, and then the couple of races afterwards, he got maybe a bit of impatient, desperation that we talked about before, and I think that he carried that on into Detroit as well. And then he managed to not do that in the last race, but it depends how he will react now to see if he can really get an opportunity to win. So
yeah, I wouldn't say O'Ward's been a disappointment, but I would say it's disappointing that he's not closer to Alex Palou. I think we've spoken about it at length. His approach in some races was a bit questionable. You had Long Beach, he finishes 17th because of the two sort of, maybe the first move is a bit more negotiable, but the second move, which was just pure desperation. You had the Detroit issue where, he crashed into he tried to go past Ferrucci and then just binned it. You had the Indy 500, which was, again, you could argue either way, but again, it was probably born out of a bit of impatience. When you don't have those moments, he's been finishing, up in the top 4. So you can't really say it's a disappointment, but I think it's disappointing that, he's had these few races where, he could have had a much stronger result, and he's maybe made a move that, if you were a bit more patient, you could have waited a few corners even sometimes, and that's maybe cost him quite a few points across the season so far. So he's not a disappointment, but I think
I didn't mean Pato as a whole as a disappointment. I just
meant,
disappointing with the Indy 500 and the couple of races after that.
Yeah, I think I would personally be a bit more harsh and say I would be a bit disappointed with him for some of the other moves in other races, but yeah, I wouldn't say he's for me a disappointment, but disappointing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know, that's what I was trying to say as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's disappointing because he has shown the pace, but at the same time, the fact that we're disappointed is encouraging because O'Ward has shown pace at every single race this year. There hasn't been a race where he's been off the pace, and he's qualified for the Fast 6 in every race bar Detroit. He's got on the podium 4 times this year, and that's already matched his tally from last year, and it's only one of his tally from 2021. And matched his tally for 2020 for that matter. And as I said, the pace has been there in every single race so far, and I think the reason maybe we are disappointed is because we know O'Ward's got it in him. It's just these silly mistakes have really, really cost him. I think maybe we do look at him as the biggest challenger to Palou, which is why we are actually slightly disappointed that he's dropped, 40 points in Indy, 20 in Detroit, and 20 in Long Beach. And that's maybe why we're just disappointed, because we know O'Ward's got it in him. He just hasn't quite got it together, which Palou is just so good at doing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at 3 of those 4 podiums have been second places as well. So he's been just missing out on wins. I mean, he could have won the first 2 races. St. Pete was, that was just wildly unlucky. He should have won that race if it wasn't for that, minor blip with his engine on, in the closing laps, and then Texas without the late caution. You never know what could have happened, possibly passing Newgarden. So there's a lot of ways you could say this could be a very different story for O'Ward, but I do agree that it's promising. Rather, yeah, you can take a positive outlook, I guess.
Cool. Moving on slightly away from the drivers, but onto the best race of the year. So we've had 8 races gone. I'll let you guys go first. What's been your favourite race of the year?
I mean, right. So I would say St. Peter's been entertaining, but that was entertaining, but that was largely because of the incidents. Road America being the most recent, there was a lot of action, obviously a lot of overtakes. The 500 was the 500. That was, again, massively entertaining, such a great spectacle. But I would say Texas, actually, was probably my favourite race so far. I think it was widely regarded as one of the best oval races we've had in years. The following, drivers were following so closely. There was a lot of passing. There was even, a hint of pack racing in there. So I think that was a race that maybe dispelled the myth that oval racing, is just going around in circles. It was a lot more than that. I think drivers were using multiple lanes. Actually, as we just mentioned, it's a shame it ended under yellow because we could have had for the second straight year there, a very, very close finish at the checkered flag. But yeah, I would say Texas.
Yep, completely agree. And again, all the points you've mentioned, I think there was a time, that period where O'Ward was just ludding away with it for that period of time. But once we got that last kind of 50 laps, the last 50 laps were some of the best oval racing I've seen in years. I mean, especially when you look at Texas and the struggles that IndyCar have had in recent years with the PJ1 limiting us to one line around corners, but we were 2, even 3 wide for most of the races. And the last, as I said, 50 laps where you had O'Ward, Dixon, and O'Ward, Palou, and Newgarden all battling for position. It was such a sensational spectacle, especially when you had them side by side for multiple laps in a row. And as you mentioned, that was kind of the first time we got any sort of pack racing for years, and just so entertaining to watch. So many cars close together, and the race just turned on its head. Like, there was that period where O'Ward he had lapped everyone apart from Newgarden, and then the race just turned around so quickly, and the racing after them was just spectacular. I think it kind of raised the point we need more 1.5 mile ovals in IndyCar, because if this is the racing it produces, we need some more of that.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point, actually. It got conversation flowing into it about, IndyCar needs more super speedways, because, I mean, that was how good the race was, that it set that sort of, that discussion flowing. Yeah, that for me is clear as the best race so far.
Yeah, I said not just as a race wise, but I think kind of the atmosphere around in it. I said the Indy 500. I think every race before that kind of leads up to it, so then you get all the anticipation and you just get so excited. And I feel like this year it didn't disappoint. And it may have not ended in a way that everyone agreed on, but I feel like the racing beforehand and all the battling, it was just an amazing to watch, and it was very entertaining, and it had everyone on the edge of the seats and that. So
Yeah, I mean, Indy 500 is Indy 500. I can't think of a time that Indy 500 has ever disappointed. So it's called the greatest spectacle in racing for a reason.
Yeah, and I think it felt like, on a wider scale, there was more hype around it. The attendances were up, towards the levels of the 100th anniversary race. So I think in that regard, you could also look at that as it was a significant race for the sport as well. It felt like there was just vast interest in it. Obviously, there's always vast interest in it, but it felt like a big step forward, and hopefully that sort of, the attendances can be maintained into years to come, because that race it's so good for IndyCar, because there are far more eyes on it, and when it is a race as good as it was, as much as maybe there was a bit of controversy in some people's eyes, I think that's only good for the sport.
Absolutely agreed on that front. So Again, I'll let you guys go first because I've got a bit of a complicated answer. The specific moment of the season, what moments has particularly stood out special?
Well, I think an easy one to go with would be the events of Road America with Will Power and his antics, and maybe we'll discuss that. But for me, it is going back to the Indy 500 again and the post-race celebrations with Joseph Newgarden, his pre-planned move to find a hole in the fence and, go through and went into the crowd to celebrate. For me, that's going to go down in IndyCar folklore. That's something that the images will be looked back on for years and years to come. I think it all started with the final lap. I was on my feet shouting at the TV, and then when he wins it, there's that release, and you have his wife in tears. You have Newgarden screaming on the radio, but then it was just the fact that he the first thing in his mind was to just go into the crowd and celebrate with the fans. A man of the people, as I've said before. And then it's always nice to see the other drivers coming up and congratulating him. You had, I think, Scott McLaughlin, Connor Daly, the first couple to, they went on the track and congratulated him. It was just a really nice moment, and I think on a wider scale, it's a moment that will define Newgarden's career, really, and define his legacy in IndyCar and kind of secure him as one of the greats. And for me, I think that is the moment of the season for a lot of reasons.
I said as well the Will Power interview. I think it's just something that you wouldn't kind of expect someone to say like on live television, but it's because that they've got no media training that you get that, and I think that's what kind of draws the audience in, because that what they're saying is true, and that what they're saying, it isn't some sort of pre-planned answer. It's actually what they're feeling, and you get an insight to into the mind and just basically what they're thinking and feeling in that moment.
Yeah, I think it was great. I think you kind of see that, the characters within the sport in an unfiltered way, rather than being, supremely media trained and not robotic, but almost, you're saying stuff to please your team and whatever. That was not in Power's mind. He was insistent on getting everything on his mind out, and that's only good for the sport as well.
Yeah, again, very similar answers. I think Power at Road America is my favourite off-track moment in the season. The interview just got so much better as it went along. It started off at him blasting Road America before he moved on to Grosjean and Dixon. Oh, just unbelievable! So unfiltered. It's just so brilliant to watch. I mean, you just love characters like that. You just love seeing it because it's a talking point, and it gets people to back someone like Power because. There's a lot of people who don't like Roman Grosjean very much, and people can relate to Will Power on that front. And I've just never seen anything like that on live television. It was brilliant, so unfiltered. But at the same time, looking at a more serious perspective, I think Newgarden the 500 is magical. You got one slightly different reason. I think the moment of him crossing the line, and it's the Indy 500 has been such a burden in his career. And Power, actually, out of all people, said this a couple of years ago. But you can't be considered an IndyCar great until you've crossed a yard of bricks in first place. And Newgarden ticking that box just felt like a career-defining moment. It felt like the moment he actually became an IndyCar great. And for someone who's deserved it for so long, and for whatever reason it's eluded him, that moment of him crossing the line and kind of fulfilling his inevitable destiny, I think definitely a magical moment which we'll look back on in years to come.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it much better myself, really, given how many attempts he had and came short, failed to win it. I think it is such a burden for drivers, and I think for the rest of his career now, he'll know he's won it, and that's pressure off when he goes to IMS next year as well, and as the reigning champion. You never know, maybe he'll go on and win more, but he's got that, it ticks off his resume, and it's massive. It's a massive moment, I think, in IndyCar history, really, for someone who is obviously one of the greatest drivers, but he will be sealed as one of the greats because of that.
So that's enough talking about this. Also, the first 8 races, not quite next season yet. We'll look forward to that in September. Race of the season, 8 rounds, 9 races. One to watch. I'll kick off this time. David Malukas. His name's been thrown around in kind of potentially a CGR move, potentially a bigger move in the career. And honestly, the first half of the season has been sort of underwhelming. I want to say, how can he respond when the pressure ramps up, when his name starts getting thrown around in the hat? How can he perform? I think Malukas has done brilliantly at becoming a fan favourite. Just needs to elevate those results on track, and then he's going to be really in contention for the seat. Again, really popular character. And I think now the pressure's ramped up. Now he's going to circuits that he's actually done quite well at. So Gateway, for example, is obviously a very clear one. Iowa, he's gone very well at in his career before. As an example, Mid-Ohio has actually tended to go really well at in his career as well. And I think now the pressure ramps up and people are starting to look at Malukas more. I think he's definitely going to be one to watch between now and the end of the season, particularly if he's linked with a bigger seat.
Yeah, I would agree there. I mean, he's not who I picked, but he finished 4th in Texas, did he? And then other than that, he's been very quiet, but I think this is the part of the season where he may really come into his own. Obviously, you mentioned the short ovals. Gateway Hill will be looking forward to going back there after his near win. If he had one more lap last year, you never know what could have happened. He could have been an IndyCar winner. But yeah, I would agree there. But for me, I've maybe a bit more boring. I've gone for Newgarden just because he is the one with the likes of Iowa Gateway coming up where he is just supreme. He's the one I can really see mounting the challenge to Alex Palou. Hence, I think he is for me the one to really watch. There's been a lot of talk about, Palou's not had a DNF. Maybe that DNF will come, and a DNF and finishing, 27th or whatever is all it might take if Newgarden then goes on to win a race. For that gap to be, to be closed up a decent amount. I think he is the one I can see capitalizing on anything that may go wrong for Palou. Especially, Palou hasn't been, the strongest at the likes of Iowa and Gateway as far as I can recall, compared to Newgarden. So, yeah, he's one for me. And then I actually went for another as well, with that being Marcus Armstrong. Just, I think off the back of Road America, where he was right up in the podium fight before what is really just a strategy blunder from CGR. He's shown racecraft, he's shown qualifying form. I think he's already in a relatively few races got it nailed down. He's leading the Rookie of the Year standings, despite not doing the 2 oval races, and he'll miss a further 3, with Takuma Sato now confirmed to do the rest of those for Ganassi. So yeah, I'd be interested to see what Armstrong can produce for the rest of the season, given he now really seems to have settled.
Yeah, I'm actually slightly disappointed we were not seeing Armstrong in ovals, particularly after Indianapolis. There was quite a few rumours and he seemed really interested. And obviously, Sarto's a very safe pair of hands. I would have liked Armstrong to do those races. I don't think it'll affect him in the Rookie of the Year too much, unless Canapino can pull something out of the hat. But I think definitely shown a lot of potential, and he's still only 6 races into his career, and I think already he's showing very strong pace. And I think, again, someone we could see right towards the front at the end of the season.
Yeah, I second the sentiment about ovals, really. I think it's not through a lack of wanting to do it. He clearly is keen to, hop in the car for ovals. And I think, if maybe he does get a full-time, drive next season where he does have the ovals included, it might set him back a little bit, because I feel like it's easier to just be phased in through the doubleheader at Iowa Gateway rather than go straight into Texas, which a lot of drivers say is one of the toughest tracks to learn and get to grips with. Yeah, it's a bit disappointing. I don't think Sato's done anything particularly spectacular in his 2 appearances, but as you say, he's a safe pair of hands, and maybe that's what they're looking for this season. But if I was Armstrong, I might be a bit disappointed. I would have liked to see what he could produce, but hopefully next season he gets that oval drive, because he's clearly keen, especially with having attended the 500.
Yeah, I went for someone like near the top. I went with Scott Dixon. I know that you can think of everyone with this because of how quickly IndyCar can change. Nothing is certain, but I went with him because he's constantly in the top 10. He was in the top 10 7 out of 8 races, I think. And then he's currently tied 5th in the championship. So I feel like he's okay there, but I feel like he's in a good place as well if he keeps up with being in the top 10, because then he can really capitalise on if other people make mistakes. Because as long as he's there and he's doing well, and if other people are like doing well one week and doing bad the next week, I feel like that couldn't really push him through. And also, you can't forget that he's an experienced like driver. He knows what he's doing, and he knows when to go for a move and when not to, and he obviously knows that it's not over and right up until the end. So I feel like he could be one to watch.
Moving on. Top 3 of the championship. I don't think this one so much 2 to discuss. I presume everyone's got Palou.
Yep, absolutely.
Newgarden.
Yep.
Yeah. For him.
And the third one, I've gone O'Ward. Anyone else gone the same?
I've gone for Dixon. Yeah, I think between them it's really a toss of a coin. I think maybe first we need to mention Ericsson. I just don't see him keeping that. He's still in second, but I don't really see him keeping that. Newgarden is really putting the pressure on him. And I feel like Ericsson's there to pick up the pieces, but in races where there aren't pieces to pick up, there's others that are, in terms of raw pace, a bit faster than him. You look at the likes of Newgarden, O'Ward, Dixon, obviously Palou. Yeah, I've gone for Dixon over O'Ward just purely off the fact he's been a bit more consistent this season, albeit with less headline results. I think he's taken a single podium this season compared to O'Ward's 4, but O'Ward's just had those races where he's made the odd error. Those bits of impatience that we spoke about. Whereas I can see Dixon, reliably guaranteeing sort of maybe top 6 finishes for the rest of the season. You never know with O'Ward. He showed a more measured side to himself at Road America. So if he keeps that up, I would probably say, he may edge Dixon into the top 3. But for me, I mean, as I said, it's a toss of a coin, really. It's really hard to tell between them. I think the only 2 that I would say are certain are Palou and Newgarden, really, especially with Newgarden looking at the tracks we've got coming up.
O'Ward, I said this a couple of weeks ago, these mistakes aren't common. Whatever's happened this season, I think it's happened, and I think Road America's maybe a sign of his learning. I don't think there's any point in Road America where he seemed desperate. Obviously, there was that small Ferrucci incident in the first lap, but I don't think even when he dropped to 9th, whatever it was, he didn't seem particularly desperate. And I think, again, similarly, there's a couple of tracks here O'Ward will be looking at favourably. You look at Iowa and Gateway, went really well at Iowa last year and has traditionally gone quite well at Gateway. Indianapolis, another one he's been pretty good at. Mid-Ohio, again, another track he's been pretty solid at. So there's definitely potential there for O'Ward, and I think outright pace, which is probably slightly stronger than Dixon, I think. He does definitely has the ability to challenge Palou, and I think outright pace is probably similar to Palou, just hasn't quite had a consistency that Palou does. But I think, again, when you look at the next couple of rounds, some of them look at favourably. Nashville as a complete lottery. That could be a massive point swing either way. I think he's probably got the edge for me. I think he's probably the weakest out of the 3 mentioned, but I think he's definitely going to be up there if things do go his way and he keeps it cool.
Yeah, I think I do agree that he probably, O'Ward has the edge on Dixon in terms of raw pace. It's just about finding that consistency, because if you take, obviously, as we've spoken about, O'Ward's best results, 3 seconds, a third, a fourth. Dixon has finished inside the top 7 in every race bar Long Beach, where incidentally it was O'Ward who ultimately I think led to his retirement. I don't know if there was maybe a secondary issue, but obviously O'Ward put him in the wall at Long Beach. Whether that was O'Ward's fault, that's obviously been up for a lot of debate. Dixon's only got the 1 podium, a 3rd place, but he's trustworthy, even if not quite possessing the same pace as O'Ward this season.
We're gonna have a guess at which driver is going to win the remaining rounds of the season, not individually, just which set amount of drivers going to win in the last 9 rounds of the season. So obviously, you've got Mid-Ohio, Toronto, the doubleheader Iowa, Nashville, Indy, Annapolis, Gateway, Portland, and the Laguna Seca. So we're going to do this slightly differently. So, gonna name a driver, got to say yes or no, and then Alex Palou. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. There we go. All round Alex Palou. I think next one, Newgarden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Possibly times 3.
Possibly times 3. I mean, he could well win every oval race this season. I wouldn't be particularly surprised, to be honest. Particularly with short tracks coming up. There we go. 2 we all agree on. Someone else could name me 2.
I put Scott McLaughlin. I think he could do it. You'd have to see. It depends on the track.
Yeah, I agree with Scott McLaughlin as well. I think with, as I mentioned, the two of the races that he won last season coming up, I can see him being strong. I mean, I could even see him taking the fight to Newgarden, possibly on some of the short ovals. He was fairly close until the late stages at Gateway last year. It'd be a hard exercise trying to beat Newgarden on one of those tracks, but yeah, McLaughlin I can see winning another.
Yeah, I'm agreed. I think McLaughlin will pick one up. Looking at Portland quite favourably. I think Nashville as well. He went up very well at last year. You know, the lottery that is Nashville, anyone could win it. I think McLaughlin is too good not to win another race this season. Despite me saying he's disappointed me slightly, I think he'll win another race. He tends to have his weekends where he's right at the front for the whole weekend, and there's no way he doesn't have one of them between now and the rest of the season.
Yeah, another I would say Scott Dixon. I can't see him going the season without winning a race.
I've actually said no. Believe
Did
it or
you?
not.
Interesting.
I've gone bold. I see Dixon in the last couple of years hasn't been kind of the serial winner that we used to see him. So he won one race in 2021, which is quite early on in the season at Texas. And 2022, we saw him win 2 races. To be fair, by this point last year, he hadn't won a race either, but he won 2 races at Toronto and Nashville last year. And Dixon is incredibly consistent. There's no hiding from that. The amount of top 5s, top 10s he gets is unbelievable. But as he gets older, his outright pace, isn't strong. And when you compare him to someone like Pelot in particular, but you also look at names like O'Ward, Newgarden, McLaughlin, he just, on a given race weekend, he doesn't seem quicker than all of them. And I think something will have to go his way for it to happen this year. And I don't think he's quite got the pace over all of them on the given weekend. Yes, he's a fantastic driver, but he'll get more podiums, get more top 5s, but I don't think he's got the outright pace on a given weekend to beat everyone.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. However, looking at Road America, he managed to charge from right towards the rear of the field back towards the front, and he did seem to have that pace. He was quite close to challenging O'Ward latterly. Yeah, I do agree. Over the course of the season so far, he hasn't maybe had the same pace as some of them, but I can see there being at least 1 or 2, looking at Nashville, more chaotic races maybe where opportunities do arise for him, and I can see him being the sort of driver that will pick up the pieces there.
I don't know. I see both the sides of it, to be fair. I feel like right now, not really, but like Dan said, he didn't win any races like last season up until this point, and he did towards the end, so it's possible, but I don't see it happening right now.
So another no for Scott Dixon. That's a surprising one, actually. Archie's in solidarity in picking Scott Dixon. Someone else, throw a driver out there who you've got.
I am going to go a bit bold and say Christian Lundgaard. I think he's shown such pace on the road courses that I think I can see him. It's a tough one, but I want to be bold. I don't know if I'm being sensible, I don't know if I can see him winning a race. However, obviously he took a pole. He's clearly got the speed. It's whether Alex Palou can really be defeated. That seems the question. But yeah, I'd like to say Lundgaard looks like a likely next first-time race winner. I'll throw his name out there. I'm still not fully sold on him myself, but I think it's possible.
Almost did it last year.
Yeah, so. Exactly. I'm not fully sold on it, but I think it's not completely out of the question.
I think maybe if you had a different team, maybe he could do it then. But I don't know.
Gonna throw name out there, which I'm not sure I get too many agreements on this one. Colton Herta. Very nearly won in Long Beach. Has been, on the whole, like he's been slightly more consistent than he has last year. But you look at some of the tracks: Toronto, Nashville, Indianapolis, Portland, Laguna. Some tracks coming up, he's very strong. Portland, I don't know why I said Portland, but Laguna, for example. Some tracks he's very, very strong up between now and the end of the season. And Andretti's pace as a whole is elevated this year. And, you know, the signs of Road America were showing the pace is there. And I think between now and the end of the season, Colton Herta will have one of those Colton Herta weekends where he's a class of the field, and I think he'll pick up one between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, I find it hard to disagree. However, I'm at risk of agreeing with everyone and agreeing with too many names. But I guess that kind of speaks to how competitive IndyCar is that, again, you just can't really call who's going to win. There's so many names you can throw out there. I think another one I would throw out there is, I'd say any of the McLarens, really. I can see any of them picking up a win. Rosenqvist has kind of looked close. O'Ward will surely win a race before the end of the season.
I think O'Ward is an answer.
Yeah, O'Ward, definitely.
Cool. And yeah, you probably guess I've gone for O'Ward as well.
An interesting one's Alexander Rossi. I can see him winning a race, but I also can see him maybe falling just short of winning a race. It's quite hard to look forward really at who may win a race, who may not, because there's so many factors and there's so many drivers who could win a race. But I can see Rossi winning a race. Obviously, he won the second race at the Indy Road Course last year. Anyone got any views on Rossi?
I've actually put Rossi in my list. I think the signs have been good. He's outperformed Rosenqvist, I'll tell you, this year, and he's got 4 top 5s already this year, and the pace all round has been pretty good. And I can see him nicking a win somewhere, whether that's at Nashville or Indianapolis. I think the signs are there, and I think I need a bit of a left field driver. So I'm going to go Rossi. I think pace has been pretty strong, and I think he'll nick one somewhere similar to Herta. The things will fall in place for him on a given weekend, and he'll claim the victory.
I agree. I think he can do it as well.
Oh wow, that's a surprising one. All 3 round for Alexander Rossi.
Just because I know that he desperately wants it, Marcus Ericsson. Because I know that he really wants it. So I feel like, and he nearly got it in the Indy 500. But I don't know if he'll be able to convert it into a win, but I think he could.
Disagreed. Hard to disagree.
Yeah, I disagree as well. I think I would put him in the Dixon bracket, but probably below Dixon in that bracket. I still feel like Dixon's shown better pace than Ericsson on the whole. Ericsson will need, you can see him maybe winning a race like Nashville where there's a lot of chaos in front of him. I don't feel like on raw pace, though, he is one that I would suggest will win a race again this season.
Yeah, similar to Dixon, I don't think Ericsson's ever had an IndyCar weekend where he's just the quickest. I don't think it's ever happened. All 4 of his wins have got slightly fortuitous circumstances. Indianapolis is probably the one where he actually deserves it the most. But you look at Detroit 21, where power broke down with 2 laps to go. St. Petersburg, where Ward broke down with 2 laps to go, and Nashville, where he caused an accident and he still won the race because Herta had an accident with about 5 laps to go. Yeah, Ericsson just doesn't kind of have the given pace. I think this year, where drivers kind of stepped up how consistent they are, Pelot in particular, but even someone like a Ward, for example, as well as the whole McLaren squad, I think there's not a given weekend where Ericsson will be the quickest. I've got one more on my list. Willpower. Anyone else agree, or am I alone on this one?
Yeah, it's a tough one, really. If we were to go for 9 separate names and just be optimistic and say we were going to get 9 races.
Bold. Newgarden winning one of the short ovals.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think Newgarden will be a repeat winner. It's tough to see, really. You've got the likes of Power. I think if Grosjean can book up his ideas, he's one that you could say is in contention. I feel like Rosenqvist, he's not been miles off at times. I don't feel like he's quite got the pace of his teammates as such, I think, especially over the rest of the season. Kirkwood is someone who has had supreme pace. It's just a matter of him being at the front of the field for the entirety of races. Yeah, it's really hard to select a list of drivers who you think will win the races remaining.
We'll lock these in for the end of the season review. So, just to recap, Archie's gone for Joseph Newgarden, Alex Pelot, Scott McLaughlin, Scott Dixon, Christian Lingard, Pato O'Ward, and Alexander Rossi. I've gone for Joseph Newgarden, Alex Pelot, Scott McLaughlin, Colton Herta, Pato O'Ward, Alexander Rossi, and Will Power. And Ellie's gone for Joseph Newgarden, Alex Pelot, Scott McLaughlin, Pato O'Ward, Alexander Rossi, and Marcus Ericsson. So, 9 races time. We'll see if any of these are wildly correct, and probably embarrass ourselves at the end of the season review. But that's what it's all for at the end of the day, I think. Again, as Archie mentioned, we've made some bold shouts, no Kirkwood shouts, no Grosjean shouts, and there we are, your 2023 mid-season review. So we've recapped the first 8 races and look forward to the last 9. Drop your predictions below. Will they be as crazy as ours? Well, see how you do and play along, and we'll see how you do at the end of the season. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for the team for joining me. Again, we'll be back next week after the race at Midway High, where we really start off the summer swing of IndyCar and look towards the end of the season. As I said, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you next week.